Fear not, Internet. Although I am at the reviewing 4th edition wall, today we are not talking about 4th edition. We're not technically talking about RPGs at all today. I thought I'd take a little bit of a left turn, and instead of doing an opinion, I want to tell you a story. This is the story of my world. For a little bit of background, I've been building this world since I was 10 years old. It's a very, very long time ago. The origin of the world was simply a need that I had for a single continuous fantasy setting that was generic, so that like we didn't have to stick to any particular canon, um, but also would allow me to have stories in a setting that are connected to each other. So the origin of the setting is actually that it is that at least at first glance it appears like a generic fantasy setting, like as bog standard and as expected as you can possibly get. Now this was years before I ever played D&D, so many assumptions from a D&D centered world, like worlds that are made specifically for Dungeons and Dragons, aren't in the setting. Some of them have been incorporated because I think they're good ideas or because it is useful for me, since not only do I write stories in this setting, but I also run a lot of D&D games. In particular, there are some assumptions from 4th edition that have crept their way in. Some of those are canon, and some of them I just tend to hand wave when I run D&D. But I thought I would do a series of videos talking about the setting, its history, what its themes are, and today we're going to get started with creation, the origin story of the entire world. The world is called Aleas Emrod, and it starts with Denadreth. Denadreth is the name of the overdeity. It is the single highest power in the setting. It is, if you will, God Big G. In as far as Denadreth has the ability to will things into existence through no effort. Denadreth created a race of beings called the Eldane. The Eldane are formless. They do not have any physical shape. They do not have mass. They are not physical matter. They're not magic, but they are pure energy. They're a more primordial form of energy than magic itself. Magic comes later. Magic gets created somewhere down the road. But the Eldane often appear to mortal eyes as these wispy tendrils of energy, of light, of lightning, of twisting colors and undulating shapes and forms without border. They can be perceived, but they cannot be accurately described because they don't actually exist physically. The Eldane were created amidst a vast and mainly empty universe. There were the stars, but there were no worlds. It was just an endless, empty expanse of void. But it was the universe. It was creation. It was space that was given to them to explore and protect and to develop at their will. And so they spent a long time, countless eons maybe, time unknown, frankly. It could have been days, it could have been months, it could have been years, it could have been centuries, it could have been eons. We don't know. What we do know is that at some point, there came to be more than just the Eldane in the universe. From a different universe, or perhaps simply a different plane of existence. It is unclear exactly where the Eldane or where these newcomers originate from. But there came a race called the Velnu. Now, the Velnu, very similar to the Eldane in that they are not physical creatures. They are beings of energy. They were equal in power. They were equal in nature. They were opposite in intent. They came to the universe to destroy. And remember that there is no world to destroy. There's no like mortal life. There's no physical structures to tear down. The Velnu wished to destroy creation itself, the very existence of space and time. The universe in its entirety was their goal. And the Eldane could not stand for this. It was their very nature, their very central mission, the purpose of their being, to protect the universe. And so they stood against them. Now, what happens when you have two completely equal armies, fully 100% equal forces, 300 Eldane, 300 Velnu? Their numbers are very small. There were not countless thousands. They've met in battle, and it came to a stalemate. And at some point, the Velnu decided, we're going to pull back. We're not accomplishing anything here. We pull back to our own home universe. And the Eldane celebrated their victory. We have done what we are created to do. We have succeeded. We are victorious. And sometime later, it happened again. And then again, and again. Who knows how many times this cycle repeated? This process is what is known as the War Before the World. It is a period of time that is very poorly known amongst mortal scholars. Only a handful of mortals ever learn about this subject, usually, and not from texts. It's not written anywhere. Or if it is, it's in the mad ramblings of prophets who have sort of glimpsed truth beyond their understanding. No, it's usually privileged information given by the Eldane themselves to a very, very select few. Regardless, at some point, Denadreth looks at this cycle and says, this is no good. We're going to give the Eldane an edge. And so Denadreth creates Nether. Nether is physical substance. Denadreth invented physical substance and gave it to the Eldane as an ally. Nether was conscious. Nether moved fluidly through space. It had mass. It had form. It had borders. It had edges. It could not do great works like the Eldane could, but it also was fully immune to the Eldane's power, and so it was to the Velnu. And so when the Velnu next attacked, the Nether would spread itself out as a shield against their attacks, and then the Eldane would come and launch their own attacks, and the Velnu were not protected. And so even these many infinities would eventually be worn down by equal infinities. This is how the Eldane work. They are literally infinite in power and in might. There is no limit to their abilities, but when matched against other infinities, there is a give and take. You know, infinity is exhaustible in this setting. Strawberry kiwi juice, if you're wondering. Finally, but here's the thing. Even if they are defeated, and now the Eldane and the Nether together were soundly defeating Velnu, driving them back faster than ever. These were not stalemates that one side decides to withdraw from. No, they were driven back to their dimension. But they are immortal. They are fully immortal, incapable of death. Death hasn't been invented yet. That's how immortal they are. Even so, this was an endless cycle. And so the Eldane concocted a plan. We're going to create a prison. We should not allow them to retreat back to their world, their realm, whatever dimension they come from. They're going there to regroup and then launch their attack again, and this will continue forever. One day, maybe, we will lose. It's conceivable. So we're not going to let that happen. Instead, they created a trap, a prison for the Eldane, or for the Velnu. And using Nether as the net, captured the Velnu and encased it in the trap, which was this thing inspired by Nether itself. The Eldane saw physical substance and said, this is useful. It is permanent. It It's solid. It endures through time. And they created the world of Aleas Emrod, which in ancient tongues means prison. And so you have the Eldane and Nether now left around this world, this uninhabited world that is a prison, containing their immortal enemies, an enemy that can never be fully defeated. And the Eldane look to Nether and they see, this is also an enemy we can never defeat. It is fully immune to our power. What if it should turn on us? And paranoia and suspicion overcame them, and they betrayed their ally. Through works not well understood, the Eldane were able to open a rift to a distant dimension and trick Nether inside. Through their deception, Nether was cast out of this realm, and the Eldane were left alone, finally. But their prison needed a lock. It needed something to sustain it, and that thing was mortal life. Life is a very powerful thing in Aleas Emrod. It is an energy that suffuses space around itself. And so they decided to create mortal races that could die, races that were not immune to their power, races that they could control, that they could have dominion over, so that they could never rise to the point of threatening the Eldane and their holy mission. A few of the Eldane, specific individuals who specialized in creation and design. They well understood how life works, how it develops, what it needs. A handful of these came together to create the first 4 races. You have first Lavas, the god of the elves, who created them in the northwestern forest of Dandrael. Dandrael is the name of the forest, which became the Elven Wood. You have Madas, that created mankind. You have Kadror, who created the dwarves in the southeastern set of islands. And you have the brothers Radcastan and Balbados, who collaborated to create the Haruk in northeastern island of Mornir. These are the first 4 races. The elves, which at that time were called the Vanyari. The Vanyari later split into elves and drow. You have humankind, the dwarves, and Haruk. Which are roughly an orc equivalent type of race. These races have differing lifespans, durabilities, sparks of life. Humans famously very go-getter, very ambitious. Elves much more long-lived. That's sort of like slow-burning kind of life. And then the Haruk, even more ambitious and even more short-lived. Their fire burns brighter than any of the others. And the dwarves, sort of between humans and elves. This was found to be an acceptable and indeed ideal balance for the Eldane, who needed life to flourish but not overwhelm the world. They needed mortals to survive on their own without additional input, while they stockpiled magical power for a future campaign to utterly and permanently contain the Velnuve. This was a temporary thing. It was always meant to be a temporary measure. And the Eldane were preparing for the day when it should become permanent. Creating reservoirs of magical power. finding ways to drain the Velnu of their power. They have all this time, however much time it takes, to prepare for the final confrontation with the Velnu, these dark gods, this secret pantheon. And in the meantime, the mortals regarded the Eldane as gods. And well, they should. They are creators. Each Eldane had some small part to play in the creation of the world. One for the plants, one for the sky, one for the seas, one for beasts. And each race has one or two creator deities for themselves. And the mortals revered the Eldane, as one does. They looked upon them with fear and trembling, and they got very little in return. Now, the Eldane did not completely ignore their creation. No, they gave them some very specific instructions. You shall not make war. You shall not make war was the one commandment that the gods gave every race. You shall not make war, because war wipes out large sections of mortal life. And this is counter to what mortal life is for. They need to flourish. They did not say do not kill. They said do not make war. It was very soon after creation that commandment became broken. But more to the point, the mortals took that commandment and expanded it. They said, if they do not want us to make war, it must be because they value our lives. If they value our lives, then they must also want all of these things. And they created myths and legends and dogma based entirely around the extrapolation of the one command that the gods actually gave. They assigned names and personalities to the deities, some real, some not. And so all religions in Aleas Emrod are made up. The gods are real, but the religions are not. The gods do not hear prayers. They don't care. They don't. What mortals want is not of concern to them. All that is of concern to them is that mortals stay under control and don't wipe themselves out until the appointed time. And we'll get to the appointed time in my next video.